All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 7th week out of the 8-week series that we're doing on evangelism. This week, we're going to be talking about the three main barriers that get between us and us being able to share the gospel. Does anybody in here struggle at times sharing the gospel with people? Yeah. Are there any main reasons why? You can just shout them out. Fear of rejection. Resistance. Awkwardness. Work policies. Work policies. Any others? Well, we're going to be talking about a few of them that we can actually control, and I've actually worked in environments before where you couldn't go around sharing, but you find loopholes. You find ways to have conversations with people. But like I said, this week we're actually going to be covering these three here. But the first thing that I want to start off with is why. Why are we to evangelize? And evangelism is just a big word for sharing the good news. Telling people about Jesus, what he's done for you, why your life is so different, and why you want them to have that as well. So we'll start off with going through the Great Commission, because those are our actual marching orders. Jesus tells the disciples in Matthew 28, 16 through 20, the 11 disciples left for Galilee, going to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshiped him, but some doubted. That seems pretty crazy to think that if he just rose from the dead, they saw him murdered on a cross, he was in a tomb for 3 days, and now he's standing in front of them, that they still doubted. But the reality is that we're humans, and some things are just too good to be true. And that's where I kind of wonder if some of them were at that time. But Jesus didn't address any of that. He gave them their marching orders. It says in verse 18, Jesus came and told the disciples, I have been given all authority in heaven and on earth. So Jesus is in control. Jesus is in charge. He's already redeemed all these people that want to come to him and anybody else that wants to, and he's actually proven himself. He goes on to say, therefore, because he has all authority, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all of the commands that I have given you. And be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. So he gives us what he's expecting of us. He tells us, you're to go out, you're to share this good news, you're to teach people and walk alongside of them. That's what we call discipleship making. And every Christian, every disciple is expected to do this. Now, some of us have some natural gifts, some of us have some spiritual gifts that help us along this way, but we're all called to do this. And there's not one certain way to evangelize to people. Each one of us will have a unique way that we do it. We'll have unique situations, and each of us will have a unique story that will help us connect well with other people. But there is a multitude of barriers that can get in the way, some having to do with us, some having to do with work, some having to do with the other people. And we're going to run into them. But there are ways to navigate around them, and there's also some other barriers that we're going to talk about tonight. The three main barriers that's usually on our end that hinders us from sharing the gospel effectively and regularly. The first one we're going to talk on is something that we all know about. It's called busyness. Busyness gets in the way of us sharing the gospel. It was probably less than 2 months ago, maybe a month ago, Steve, in one of his messages, said that the common greeting used to be, how are you? And they would say, good. But now you say, how are you doing? And they say, I'm busy. Right. It's very common. It's almost something that people work to achieve to feel that they're either ahead of the game, they're fitting in, they're doing all these things, and it's a crazy cycle, and I encourage people to kind of find a way to throttle back from that because it's not good for your life, period. But with this busyness, it keeps you from having healthy relationships. It keeps you from having healthy family relationships. It wears you out, and it's teaching your kids to run, pack the schedule. That equals success. And it doesn't at all. And it actually limits you from doing some of the things that God has gifted you to do, that God has commanded us to do. And this busyness will actually distract us from achieving what God is calling us to do. And the devil likes that. He likes it when we're either too fearful to talk about Jesus or we're too busy to talk about Jesus. Anything that can keep us from talking about Jesus, Satan's okay with. It's when you begin to talk about Jesus that he's going to come after you. So if you've ever felt like you were under attack and you were trying to stretch your faith, you're doing a good job. Some of these responses that people have when you talk to them about their busyness can kind of come off as excuses, but I mean, they're realistic. Like, let's say that you have 3 kids and they're all in sports, but you only limit them to one sport. That still adds up to a lot of time. If your work all of a sudden decides that, hey, we need to put you on mandatory 12-hour days because we're behind, that's not too much that you can control. You can find ways to shift things in your life, that way you can come to a balance and that you can still have those connections with people. But one of the most important things is to make sure that you're being fed during those times, because an empty cup can't fill anything. There's also, usually it's a good thing, but a long list of family and social activities can be good at first. But if we continue to add these into our schedule, we are having those interactions, but we're having those interactions with people in a closed circle. Think about your families and your friends right now. Would anybody in here say that more than 50% of them are not Christians? Anybody? There's one. Probably the majority of us, as we continue in our faith, if we're not proactive to make sure that we keep ourselves regularly around people that are not saved or don't think like us, our group, our sphere of influence becomes smaller and smaller, because we tend to gravitate towards people that are like us. It makes life a little bit simpler. But we need to make sure that we keep a portion of that there, just like Jesus did, to go around and to make sure that people know that good news that's there for them. I know these last ones here that have to do with busyness, I'm guilty of: work, projects, and traveling. Each one of these things can be a good thing, just like the rest of them, but we have to find balance with them. So what I've found most in common with these is they do produce an outcome, but is it an outcome that when we meet Christ, that he's going to be proud of that? That you could say, but look, I earned this much money. Or we earned these many awards in sports. There's so many things that we can strive after, but miss the mark of what Jesus actually wants, because there is only one thing that we take from this world to the next, and that's relationships, people, souls. Nothing else goes with us. The next barrier that we can face is apathy. Now, apathy, the problem with that is that we can become numb or uncaring to something. Now, that can happen in several different ways, but that kind of numbness can come from different struggles we've gone through. If you're prone to depression or anxiety, these are things that can make you an apathetic person. But generally, apathy is just a lack of concern for those that are not like us. The work that we would have to put into having a relationship with somebody, hoping that they will start to think like us or understand why we believe in Christ. Apathy is also a lack of concern of kingdom goals. Jesus has told us what he wants us to do. He wants us to go out and seek and save the lost. He wants us to not only tell them about him, but actually walk alongside of them and teach them. I was doing a little bit of research before coming out here for this, and there's this chart that I love to see, and it's about multiplication and multiplicity. And if one person impacts another person to following Jesus, how many people do you now have that follow Jesus? 2, okay? If you or I commit to picking 2 people to pour into this year, and those people build into disciples, and every disciple is called to disciple others, and they pour into 2 people, and you keep compounding that, after 30 years, let's just say we just pour into 2 people per year and walk alongside of them. After 30 years from you starting that, how many people, let's just say it's a full success rate the whole time, how many people would be impacted by you? You're very close. It's a little over 1 million. 1 million people through this compounding act that Jesus actually called us to do, he poured into 12. 11 were successful. But we're called to do that. We can do it at a smaller level too, but we have to make sure that we have that care and that concern. I mean, we have to not get to a point where when we are following Jesus that we just get into this regular groove of going to church on Sundays and reading my Bible throughout the week and maybe following a couple podcasts and stuff and pouring into ourselves. But we have to make sure that we're exercising the other side of that as well. We're called to learn and grow, but we're also called to build and go. And somebody said it before, another thing that can kind of pour into this pot of apathy is rejection. I know one of the hardest things that I battle with is, I'm just going to say both of my siblings are not Christ followers. One says that she believes but really doesn't do anything with it, and my other sibling, I would say, is probably in the area of agnostic. But to try to talk to them about this, you usually just get the eye roll. They don't want to hear it. So at a certain point, you just kind of have to back off a little bit and just find opportunities to just kind of share your faith in certain ways. But the best way that we can share our faith is through our actions and how we love people. Sometimes it might be to not talk about it this time and to make sure that we just listen to them, switching that lack of concern into caring for the person, meeting their needs there. And I ran into this situation with a good friend of mine. His name is Lauren, that we worked together in a factory, and he was by far an atheist, and then kind of pulled him into the area where he would at least say that he was agnostic, where he believed in something out there. And then we talked, and he would allow me to share some of these things because I wasn't just beating him over the head with stuff, and I'd let him ask questions, and I would let him know certain things I don't know the answer, but I'll go and find it, and I'll come back and I'll tell him. And this isn't like this conversation went on every single day, but at least left it open because he knew that I cared about him and that I wasn't going to just like run him over or steamroll him with the Bible. But I actually wanted to help him understand, not just get him to buy in. And that's one of the big things we need to do is we need to approach it in the same way that Jesus does, with that care and having the heart for people that are lost. People that don't know the difference, or they've been hurt by church. They've seen bad things happen, because that happens in church. You got people in church, you got something's going to be messed up sooner or later. We tend to do that. So it's very easy for a person to kind of point at a group of people and say, see, they can't even get along. See, they talk about each other behind their backs. See, they don't go out and actually carry out what they say that they do. I've just seen them just walk by all these people out here. Look, that person's in need and they don't even do anything about it. There's all different kinds of arguments that people might have. But the reality is that we have to make sure that we are carrying out the actions that Jesus has called us to. Also telling people about it, but they need to see it in action. And when we fall into the area of being apathetic, it is really a reflection on our lack of faith. Lack of faith that God actually wants me to go and talk to that person. My lack of faith of me desiring to go and do what Jesus has called me to do. It's a lack of faith. And the third one that we're going to talk about is the lack of discipline. Now, this is one that I about guarantee all of us have gone through. Anybody ever woken up on Sunday morning and said, I think I'd like to stay here in bed? Okay, there's a few of you that aren't liars. It happens. And even there was a poll done in 2020 and 2021 of pastors that were staying home and filming from home and sending it out to their congregation. And the pastors even said, I completely understand why people like to stay home and watch online. Get up, put on half your clothes, film, send it out, go relax in your recliner, have coffee. But it's real. But if we want to actually become active followers of Jesus and impact the world in the way that he wants us to, it's just like physical workout, your workout and your diet and all that kind of stuff. When you start it, it doesn't feel comfortable. You really don't want to do it. And it doesn't actually start feeling good until you've probably done it for about 2 weeks. So you actually have to keep after it. Well, it's the same thing with our spiritual disciplines. To get up and read our Bible, and not just read it for a check mark, but read it to actually grow, to get to know Jesus. To have an encounter with him, allow that to inspire you, and then you have something to go and share with people that day. If you're ever kind of like, well, I don't know really what to say, first one, your testimony. Your testimony, whether you had a major, crazy story that happened, or as I was joking around with Zach earlier today, if you grew up as a PK, and it's Jesus all you ever known, I guarantee you have stories in there that can inspire people for why you follow Jesus. Everybody has a story. Everybody has a testimony. But in the lack of discipline, there's this mentality that has been in the church probably, I would say at least a couple hundred years, of where people think that they need to bring the person to the pastor, bring the person to the church, bring the person to the priest, and that's how they learn about Jesus, and that's not how it's designed. Jesus didn't even do that. He didn't say, go and bring the people to me. He said, take what I've taught you and go. And not just tell them about it, but walk alongside of them, spend time with them, help them grow, help them understand, and then tell them to do the same. And then the opposite of what we talked about before being lack of faith, surface level faith is not what we're called to. Just simply coming to church on Sunday, just trying to stay out of trouble, not do the wrong thing, just kind of get by. We're called to something far more deeper. Jesus has called us to abundant life. And that abundant life is not going to be written out right in front of you. You may only be able to see 5 feet in front of you at a time, I mean, granted, most of us would like to see like 10 miles in front of us so we can kind of plan, but Jesus doesn't let us see that because most likely we would mess it up. We would anticipate and we'd be like, hey, maybe we need to make this turn here. And he's like, no, I'm driving. But that's going to require depth. That's going to require discipline. It's something that we have to do every single day to keep growing. Another thing that we need to do to get out of this lack of discipline is to prioritize kingdom work over digital time. So we've all seen before how you can pull out your phone, you can see how much screen time you have. If we look at the amount of time that we spend on our phones, the amount of time that we spend watching TV, streaming shows, and just general entertainment, if we took just a tenth of that and spent that on building ourselves and building others, imagine the amount of impact that we could have. We don't watch a ton of TV, but I know I'm guilty of it. I know there's a whole lot more that I could do. Evangelizing doesn't need to be intimidating. The majority of successful evangelism is done in natural conversations. I hate carnivals. I hate people yelling at me to come and do something. So when I was in St. Vincent, an island in the Caribbean, doing a missions trip, and there were people out with bullhorns standing on literal soapboxes, screaming the gospel and how people were going to die and burn in hell. I was not surprised to see that everybody's just walking by them, looking at them like they're the local idiots. And unfortunately, Christians have taken on that name because of things like that, or other people that are well known for saying and doing and protesting horrific ways. But it doesn't need to be that way, and it shouldn't be that way. It should be more of a conversation between you and a person that either you're getting to know or that you care about, and they need to know about Jesus. They need to know about a lot of other things. When you meet somebody's needs, whether it's just somebody that simply needs help with their math homework, or somebody that their car broke down and you can help them fix it or pay to fix it, if somebody needs help in their house or something, when you get into those situations, building relationships, you have an opportunity to talk to them. Talk to them about their family. Talk to them about their life. See where they're at. You'll actually have an opportunity to let them know about your faith one way or the other. You can talk about the church you go to and how much you love it and what you love about it, and they're always welcome to join you anytime that they want. Just all kinds of ways that you can work that into the conversation. But the important thing is to make sure that we listen to them, that we care about what it is that they're saying to us. Listen to voice inflections to see if they're struggling, if they're becoming uncomfortable with what you're talking about. You may need to throttle back a little bit and just give them little bits along the way instead of slamming them with something and then the door's closed permanently. I've had those. But one of the more rewarding things that I've had in doing that with somebody, my friend Lauren that I was talking about, 7 years, probably about 7 years after I had left the factory, and he and I still keep in touch via text, he actually called me up just out of the blue. I was driving out in the middle of the country in Indiana. He called me up and he's like, hey, I just want to tell you the story. And it had to do with a good friend of his that was worse of a teenager than Lauren was, and Lauren was pretty bad. These two would run side by side. And he called him up and told him about this story. His friend told Lauren about this story about how he came to know Christ. And Lauren told me, he's like, I thought I was being punked. He goes, I thought that he was just playing a joke on me. He's like, this guy would have never been associated with religion whatsoever. He's like, we used to make fun of Christians. And he called me up to tell me about this story. And he wasn't calling to tell me that he chose to follow Christ, but because of the relationship that we had and the conversations we had, I might have been the only person that he was willing to call up and tell this story to, but when he was telling it to me, he was excited, which tells me that those wheels are still turning. So the people that you spend time with today, even if you only have 15 minutes with them, and you don't ever see them again in life, you never know how that compounds with other people that kind of put a little bit more in here and there. It takes a village. So how can we overcome some of these barriers? Well, evangelism, much like public speaking, you get over by doing it. There's really no other way. You can read all the books you want, you can do all the studying you want, but that awkwardness, it's going to be there. And the more that you do it, the more comfortable you get. You're going to have successful times where people are just kind of like, I've been needing to hear that. It'd be great if that was all the time. You get the times where doors get shut in your face. But there's a mixture in there of people that you have the opportunity to come back and talk with. And that's why we have to continue to do that, continue to exercise ourselves in that area. To get to know the person, to meet a need, and to share the gospel. And what helps us in this is to begin viewing life through the eyes of God. Whether we're looking at our schedules, if we're looking at how we spend money, how we spend time and what we do with it and everything, and who we invest our lives with, leaving that room open for some people in your life that aren't like you. But to begin viewing them through God's eyes. Because it's very easy to be judgmental or even a little bit less, just to assume, like look at them and be like, I don't think they want to hear about my church. I don't think they want to hear about Jesus. But to actually just go up and begin to talk to them about it. Strike up a conversation about the shirt that they have on. If you like riding motorcycles and they got a Harley-Davidson shirt on or something like that, you can use all different kinds of opportunities to start these conversations with people. My wife jokes, but she's serious, that I don't know a stranger. I'll be at a gas pump talking to somebody. I'll be in the supermarket talking to somebody. I'll be in the elevator talking to somebody. And I'm not even an extrovert. I just see an opportunity, and I hate to be that person that walks by somebody and doesn't acknowledge them. It just makes me cringe. But we have to focus and make sure that we're looking at life through God's eyes and to have a heart that God would have. That whatever we've gone through in this world, we can remove that heart and keep God's heart in our chest so that we can still have that love and compassion and to set aside to dedicate that time, that energy into other people and not just ourselves. But going out and doing things and meeting those needs falls into this category here that we all have to understand, is that people are going to listen to you if they've seen you do it. If they see that your life actually reflects this, they'll be more prone to listen to you. And this isn't an accurate statistic, but it gets the point across, is that 90% of evangelism is nonverbal. When people see you carrying out your faith, not just walking around with a Bible, not just having your Jesus shirt on, but when they see you actually carrying out your faith and caring about them, they see something different in you than the rest of the world. Because the rest of the world is usually like, get out of my way. You're holding me up. You're a problem. I'm trying to work on me, not you. And this is the reverse of that. This is you saying, hey, I've got something that's changed my life, and that I'm excited about this. And I want you to hear about it so that you might have it as well. And this should be exciting to us. So we have to make sure that we're living not perfect, but holy lives, where we're striving for that we're finding those things along the way that we need to prune out of our life, the things that we need to add into our life so that we can have that kingdom impact. James is one of my favorite authors in the Bible. He's Jesus' half-brother, but I just love how he's so matter of the fact. He doesn't write all flowery or anything like that. He just says how it is. And James says this. In James 1:22, he says, "Do not just listen to the word of God, but do what it says. Otherwise, you are only fooling yourself." Now, I'm sure that you've probably heard that before. But this is Jesus' brother. Telling us that if you really truly believe, then you need to be doing what it says and not just brushing it off as though it's somebody else's job and I'm just a member. You know, I've already got my in. I've told Jesus I want to follow him. He's like, "Great, come follow me. I'm good." No, that's the beginning. That's the beginning of our journey. He's saying that what Jesus tells us to do, we have to do, or we're fooling ourselves. It's going to be scary one day to find out how many people spent so much time in church and reading their Bible and not actually enter into heaven. It's terrifying. So we go back to our marching orders from Jesus that we read at the beginning, the Great Commission. Matthew 28 says, Jesus came and told his disciples, verse 18, "I have been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you. And be sure of this, I am with you always, even till the end of the age." We're to go, we're to teach, we're to baptize. The very end of this is very comforting to see that he's not just sending them on their own, even though he's not there with them. He's telling them that you're going to be going and doing these things. You're going to be facing a lot of conflicts. You're going to be imprisoned. You're going to be beaten. You're going to be ostracized from the people that you once knew. But I'm going to be with you. It'd be great to actually see him and be able to put your arm around him periodically. But with all the other promises that he's fulfilled, we have to understand that this is absolutely true, that he is here with us. His Holy Spirit dwells within us. Jesus is with us. We should not fear of walking into situations and telling people about Jesus. We should not have to fear what they may do to us or the friendships that we could potentially lose. Jesus is going to be with us. So my encouragement to everybody hearing this message is to know that Jesus has expectations. We all have expectations. Jesus' expectations are laid out pretty simple. We're to love the Father, love people. And we're to go into all the world, preaching the gospel, baptizing people, and teaching them to obey his commands. It's really pretty simple. But sometimes it feels incredibly challenging to go and do these things, especially in the world that we're in today, which we're here for a purpose. We're here for this time. And Jesus has expectations for us in this time. My next one is to balance your life. Balance your life out so that you can have margin for a multitude of things. But one of them will be opportunities to not only share the gospel, but to build and pour into people. Because that's going to be one of the first things that they're going to need. They're going to need something from you, some sort of help. And you have that opportunity to meet that need. But you can't get there if you don't have the time. And just know that Jesus loved all kinds of people, that he wants us to be as bold as he was, walking into situations. Just last Sunday, Pastor Steve was talking about Zacchaeus. We saw how the people responded to that. And look at the impact that had on the people around just Zacchaeus, the people that were considered all these other sinners. This massive impact that he had, that Jesus took the time to talk to this one person that probably looked like somebody that nobody else would talk to. And he gave him that time and attention. And whatever Jesus said to him over that dinner made such an impact that he had that kind of response, that he wanted to give back, that he wanted to do good, that he just wanted to he was just exploding with joy and love. And that's what we hope to do with people. But we have to know that Jesus needs us to be bold and to be courageous and to go out and to share and evangelize to people and all the unique opportunities that we have. Because there are billions of souls at stake. Now, some of the challenges that we can face in doing this in a workplace is to know how to talk about the gospel without causing too many waves. And you can figure that out by having these regular conversations with people to know how much you can actually share, how far you can actually talk about it. Those are challenges that I faced in the factory as well. Meeting your neighbors, talking to them, knowing their names. Just to raise the hands, how many people know the names of your neighbors 3 houses away from you? About half the people. That's actually better than the last time I asked this question. That was really good. But yeah, I mean, we can just get so caught up in our own world, our own routine, that the people that are even right there around us, we don't know them. And do you know one of the most complimentary things that you can do to a person is to say their name? That was one of the things that I learned to do when I first went into ministry was I'd be standing at the door and people would be coming in. And the last church I was at was about 100 people, so you all made it very challenging on me, which is a good thing. But when they would come in, I would want to say their name to them. And I actually had some people make that comment to me, that, hey, you remember my name. Just the simplest thing like that. So get to know people, know their name, know their story, and see how you can pour the gospel into them naturally through general conversations with them to see if there's any needs that you can meet. But these are the 3 main barriers right now that usually keep people from sharing the gospel. My message is coming to a conclusion right now. I was just going to open it up to anybody that had questions. I know we're a little bit early, but that's the end of my message. We're going to pray before we finish, but I just want to see if there were any questions, struggles.
I brought up the whole thing about work because, I mean, I spend most of my day at work, so I'm around people at work more than I'm around people anywhere else. So it's, to me, that's a huge mission field for me is when I'm at work, but it's, especially for me working for the government, talking about politics, talking about religion, things like, and that's really things that are tough and hard to bring up in any kind of setting, but especially in a setting where you're trained not to talk about that. Like you said, it comes up in different places, you know, and trying to find when people are bringing it up, trying to find how to kind of interject certain things in there without it being too not too Bible thumping, but not say anything at all is even worse, you know, to me, because I'm over there the whole time like, man, I'm going to say something to that. How am I supposed to say it? And then by the time I figure it out, the conversation's over and people are gone. And I'm like, dang, well, I should have said something. You know?
Yeah. And if you're ever in those situations where you're kind of like, man, I don't know if I can like share my faith and be talking to them about Jesus and everything, it makes people feel more comfortable if you take the spotlight off of them and you talk about your own. Because when people hear about maybe some of the struggles that you've gone through or the situations that you were in before you came to know Christ and how it's changed your life, a lot of times their ears will stay open a lot more because it's not focused on them. They're just hearing your story. And it can have almost the same impact, if not sometimes better impact, than just conveying the gospel to them, hoping that they'll bite. But yeah, just listening to their stories and getting to know them, you'll find natural ways that you can. And sometimes you just ask them, say, it's like, hey, I have a story to share with you. It has to do with my faith. Do you mind? And usually if you say that, probably 3/4 people will be like, yeah, sure. Yeah. How about anybody else?
One of the things that I listen for is people who are smokers, because I used to be a smoker.
Yeah.
And talk to a smoker when you're an ex-smoker, and they always say, well, I should quit. I tried 100 times, and I still smoke. Yeah, I quit smoking about 25 times a day back when I was a smoker.
Mm-hmm.
But I finally did it, and the interesting thing was, there's a story about that. I was on my way to work in the morning, and I had cigarettes with me, but I'd forgotten to pick up a lighter. And my whole life changed at that moment, and the only thing I was thinking about was, where's the nearest convenience store where I can get a big lighter?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I used. And I found one, and I bought it, and it occurred to me that Jesus didn't die on a cross for me to be a slave to a 59-cent bit.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, every time I wanted a cigarette, that's what it felt like.
That's a good testimony.
Conversation started.
Oh, yeah.
That was a long time ago for a big music. No.
They're probably like $1.79 now.
So, I mean, it just, the point is that you can listen for something that triggers a memory in your experience, and it gives you the opportunity to tell them the story without being pushy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anybody else? All right. We'll pray. Heavenly Father, we just thank you so much for what you've poured into us, what you've poured into the disciples, and how they went out and did exactly what you told them to do. And multiplicity just ran rapid. We see the evidence of the early church that thousands came to know you. And we know that that same spirit is in us today. And we just pray that you will help convict us, create opportunities, and in those opportunities give us that nudge to know that, hey, we need to be talking to this person about this. We need to find an opportunity. And help us remember to pray each morning for those opportunities that you have for us, so that way we're paying attention to where it is you might be leading us, who you might be leading us to talk to. And then give us the words to say in each situation. Help us to just naturally care about that person and to give them our time. And then find opportunities to tell them about you and what you've done in our lives. We thank you for entrusting such a powerful and loving task to be a part of your family.